Hi, my name is Crystal Oliveria, and I'm the founder and CEO of Career Conversationalist, and parents hire me to help their child transition successfully from school to the workforce. Discuss, is your child irresponsible or lacking skills? And the first thing we're going to talk about is discover why your kid is disorganized. And it has to do a lot with the school system. So believe it or not, there's no tracking system. Your child doesn't have an incentive or a reason to be organized. When your child goes to school, the focus isn't on giving them the skill set that they need to be successful. It's based on academics. And so there's no tracking system in terms of how do they keep track of the paperwork in their binder, their backpack, or things going on at home. And there's a lifestyle that's actually encouraged of putting academics before anything and everything and all else. So the real thing is that there's no tracking system with no no grades, no rewards or punishment. And so typically what used to happen is you used to have, or when I was growing up, it was very common that you had to have certain things done in order to move forward. And then this isn't happening. So a lot of times parents come to me and they say, well, my kid can't keep the room organized. They can't keep their desk organized. I don't know how my kid's going to go off to college and do really well because everything's all over the place. And it's like, okay, well, if you think about it, it used to be that before a kid went out and played or to go play sports, they had to they had to clean their room, they had to organize their backpack, they had to do their homework before they went out and played sports. And now, a lot of times, sports or other activities are put ahead of the child needing to be organized. So what happens is activities outside of the home always become a priority. And that's why it's so common for parents to say, well, when my kid goes off to college, I'm not too worried about them struggling academically. It's more about their lifestyle. How are they going to transition that? What are they going to do? They're a slob. What kind of arguments are they going to get into with their roommates because they can't stay organized? Or, how are they not going to slip through the cracks and then miss deadlines and important things? Because what happens is when your kid is younger, as a parent, you're used to keeping track of things for them, so they're not used to doing it themselves. And then all of a sudden, one day, it's like, wow, you're an adult, you're a teenager, you're old enough, you should know this. And kids, they have no way of learning that skill set because didn't learn it with the small things, so then they struggle with the big things. And it's not like you're getting a report card showing it being taught in school. Be that school would also make notes about citizenship and other things like organizational skills, but with teachers having the burden of so many things going on, oftentimes they don't even have time to make notes, or they feel so much stress in terms of making the kids perform academically with higher test scores that life skills takes a back seat, and they're not looking to see, is your kid making progress throughout the year. So in terms of why your kid's disorganized, it just has to do with, it's not a lifestyle. It's not something that they've developed a habit or skill set. And this is important because if they don't have the skill set while they're in school now, then it's going to be hard for them when they leave high school and transition to college, and after college when they're on their own as an adult. So it's really important that they learn these skills now while there's not a whole lot of punishment, or I guess you could say not so much punishment, but the consequences aren't going to be as dire as when they become an adult. Missing a deadline when you're a kid usually isn't as big of a deal when you're an adult and you have your first job and you miss a major deadline. So that's why it's important to get this started now. So avoid assuming your kid is irresponsible. We're going to talk about 3 easy tests. And so the first one has to do with a calendar, either paper or electronic. So when you're talking to your kid, does your kid say, hold on, wait a minute, mom, wait a minute, dad, let me put this down in my calendar, I don't want to forget it? Does that ever happen? Probably not. It might maybe once in a blue moon, but I'm saying regularly or consistently. And so what happens is a lot of times kids, when they're in school, even when they're little kids, like in kindergarten, they get gold stars for remembering things. Like, oh, do you remember how to spell your name? Do you remember this? Do you remember that? We're going to take a test. Do you remember? So everything's based on memorization, and that's what the kids are used to. Like, yay, the more I remember, the better student I am, the better grades I get. So let's memorize everything. And School, there's not a big point of writing things down in a calendar. You have a test next week, or this is due next week, or your first rough draft, second rough draft, and third rough draft in your English class is due with these dates. Kids aren't used to having that conversation, so they're not used to having a calendar. Or they're used to having a family calendar, so it's like, okay, this is when my soccer games are, but not a personal calendar where they're actually having to keep track of their own stuff. And so what happens is on a family calendar, it's easier for you as mom or dad to keep track of things or to put things there or to tell them to go put it on the calendar. And then your kid doesn't really develop these skills because it's like, well, what are you doing? I don't know. Let me go ask my mom. I don't know. Let me go ask my dad. Let me see if I'm available. I don't know. And then what happens is that becomes a default. And then as they get older and older and they have more responsibilities, that doesn't work out so well because they can't remember everything. So if your kid's lacking the skill sets of being organized, it might be because they don't have a calendar and they're not used to using it. The other thing is, well, we already talked about this, keeping track, remembering versus taking notes. And taking notes can also mean like handwriting things on pencil and paper or taking notes in a cell phone using an app. Another thing that I find is that when kids do take notes, they don't know what to do with the piece of paper. So they might have a bunch of paper everywhere because they felt like, okay, well, I got recognition for taking notes. So I physically took action and physically wrote it down. But then what do they do with the note afterwards? It's like, okay, well, I have a note. Did I put it in my calendar? Did I take the note because I didn't have my calendar with me? Like, what was the purpose of it? Like, why are they doing it? I know it's important, so what am I going to do with it? Am I going to stick it in the bathroom on the mirror with a sticky note? Am I going to put it on my desk where I'm going to see it? Like, what happens if it's a note, but they don't need to know it for a couple of days, or the information is something that they don't need immediately, or they might need next month? So kids don't really understand, like, what do I do with a piece of paper? Like, if you're constantly giving them praise for writing it down, then they'll write it down. But you need to think about, like, what is the long-term goal? How do they stay organized? And so if you're, I mean, it's easy to see if your kid's not taking notes because obviously when you're having conversations, you're like, hold on, let me write that down. And I see that when I have conversations with adults, when I'm meeting with them or networking, and like, oh, that's a good idea. Hold on a moment. Like, let me jot this down. Yeah, if your kid's not doing that, then how are they going to keep track of all these important resources that they're coming across? It could be an important resource for a scholarship or an internship opportunity. It could be a lead for someone's name as far as who they should talk to about a great opportunity. Or it could be a job that they're interested in. A lot of kids want to work and they want to make money. And so it's like, great, well, what's a great place to work or who's hiring? So sometimes these things just slip through the cracks because, again, your kid's not sure what to do with the note, especially if someone says, hey, we're looking to hire, in 3 weeks. Right now we have X project going on. Well, how's your kid going to remember 3 weeks from now if they're not taking a note, and what do they do with it? If they're putting it in their phone, then they can have a pop-up reminder. If they're writing it down on a physical piece of paper, then they could stick it in their calendar for 3 weeks out to follow up with a note about why is it 3 weeks? And it could be the organization is moving or something's happening, and that's why they're not hiring out for so many weeks or something's going on. Then it gives your kid a good starting point when they're like following up with that job or that internship and be like, oh, I remember you were moving. How is that going? Are you at the point where you're ready to start looking for candidates or, carrying the conversation forward? Kind of just gives them a little bit of a social aspect. And then people feel like, oh, yeah, you really remembered what was going on. And I like you because you really care or involved in this activity. So that's something else. The other thing is, the third test is that you assume versus knowing something is proven. And a great way is to ask your kid to talk about themselves. And so this is common. A lot of times people assume, let's see, common opportunity that comes across when working with kids is interviews, especially for jobs when they really want a job or they want a scholarship or an internship. It's tell me a bit about yourself. And so people assume this is easy because you're talking about yourself. And so your kid's probably lacking the skills. And you might just think it's lazy, like, oh, they're going to be like, not looking at you, looking around the room. Their eyes are everywhere else but on you as you're trying to have a conversation with them. And you're just going to, natural assumption is like, you're lazy, you're not on top of your game, you don't know what's going on. And a lot of it is the concept of being organized and how do you talk about yourself. Like it's something that's not taught in school as far as, interviews. Hi, my name is, and this is why I'm interested in your organization, and I came across this opportunity by, you know, and just even talking about like what school they're in, what grade they're in. I see this a lot, especially in college kids when, sometimes there's more slack given when a kid's in high school looking for a job versus when they're in college and they've had a couple years where they could have worked. And so the expectation is higher. And a lot of times when they're meeting people or networking, it's really important for them to say like, "Hi, my name is, I'm so many years old, or I'm attending this school, or this is what grade I'm in, or this is the degree I'm working for." And a lot of times kids don't have that basic understanding of introducing themselves and helping people get to really know them quickly. And this is important, especially for interviews, especially for a job, when a kid's can tell them, I'm a sophomore in college and I'm looking to finish my Associates of Arts degree and transfer into a school to start earning my bachelor's degree in, as an English major. Being able to have that simple conversation just really shows an employer like, okay, you have a goal, you're working towards a goal, you know what you're doing, you know where you're going. It says a lot about a kid when they're able to talk about themselves this way. But when a kid can't, that shows that they're lacking skill sets. They're lacking the understanding of the thought process of what needs to be going forward. And so in their mind, if their head's like just totally confused, you're going to see that in their environment. You're going to see it in their desk. You're going to see it in their backpack. You're going to see it in their room. You're just going to see it all over the place because their world is going to be disorganized. And that means that their thinking is disorganized because they're going back and forth about what do I think? What do I do? What do I need to do? I thought I had it done. And it's just a mumble jumble up here. And so when that happens, it's reflective in their environment. And you'll notice as your kid starts cleaning up their environment, oops, sorry, my throat's like, ah, but you'll notice it. When your kid's environment starts cleaning up, their thought process and how they think is usually start cleaning up as well. Meaning there's less clutter, there's less disorganization. They're able to more clearly articulate what's going on, what their challenges are, or their celebrations and what they want to celebrate. So learn how your kid can develop new skills. I'm going to tell you about a real life example with the backpack story of a kid that I am currently coaching. And so when we first started working, his mom was like, oh, the kid is a total slob. Like, he needs a lot of help. I'm like, okay, let's start someplace small. Let's start with his backpack before we talk about anything else. Backpacks are small, and we'll talk about his binder because a binder is even smaller than a backpack. And so I had a conversation with him about his backpack and his binder. Why was it so disorganized and why was it so messy? And was he just being lazy? He's like, yeah, I'm lazy. I know I should do better. Every school year I set a new goal that I'm not going to be lazy. I'm going to keep it clean because it hasn't happened year after year after year. I said, okay, so what's different about this year? He's like, I'm going to be determined. I'm like, did you say that last year? He's like, yeah. I'm like, did you say that the year before that? Oh, this isn't really going to be different than the prior years. He's like, no, I'm going to be determined. I'm going to be determined. I'm like, okay, so did you have a system for keeping things organized? He's like, no, it's just organized or it's not. I'm like, okay, let's back up. So when it came to your binder, did you have the little tabs to keep track of all your classes? Do you keep all your paperwork for each class inside that tab? He's like, no, not really. It's like I just kind of shoved everything to my backpack. I'm like, okay, well, how did that work for you? He's like, well, I knew where everything was because in the beginning of the year, he'd shove the paperwork in, and then as the year went through, I'd keep shoving it in. So he knew if the paperwork was towards the beginning of the year, it was towards the front of the pile. And then it would be towards the back of the pile. So he's like, it's actually kind of working out really well for me. Like, I never thought of it that way. But yeah, I feel pretty good about my organization system. I'm like, okay, well, doesn't it make your backpack really heavy that you have all this paper you're carrying all year round? Because he wouldn't take any of it out. He's like, yeah. I'm like, aren't you worried about your back hurting? And he's like, well, sometimes it's kind of a pain at the end of the year, but at least I know where all my paperwork is. About the system that he has. And I'm like, okay, so you're excited about it, but at the same time, it's causing you grief and angst because you know you're not being really organized. You kind of have an organization system and it feels like it's working for you, but do you go through it very often? Like, what's the point of it? He's like, no, it's mostly I'm afraid that, if I throw anything out, it was a fear of throwing out paperwork because he's like, some of my teachers, I feel like, oh, well, we already reviewed that, so you should know that. He feels like he's not going to get the help he needs from his teachers if he doesn't remember something. So having all that paperwork was like a security blanket for him. Like a little kid, like they just feel secure having all that paperwork. So if he feels like he can't rely on his teachers, he has all that paperwork. You put that paperwork in your room somewhere? Like, is there a place at home you can put it so you don't have to carry it in your backpack where you still know you have access to it until the end of the year where you can clean it all out? It's like, never thought about that. No, not really. I'm like, okay, is there like a container you can put it in? Like, maybe like a basket or a drawer in a desk. There's some place designated where you can come home, you're done with the paperwork, and you just slide it in there. He's like, yeah, I can do that. I'm like, okay, great. Pick something. So he picked a container and he picked a special spot in his room, and now that's where his paperwork goes. So his backpack is lighter because he's not stashing all his paperwork in it. And then when he does get paperwork, he knows that he can't just shove it in there. He has a binder. So it only took him maybe like 10 minutes to set up the little binder divide tabs and write out the tabs for each class and to get a hole punch, one of the binder ones that slide in. And, it's funny because when he was trying to set it up, I'm like, okay, when are you going to get it done? How long is it going to take you? He's like, oh, it won't take me that long. It won't take me that long. Okay, so why are you procrastinating? No, I'll get it done. I'll get it done. Okay. And he did. And so I was asking him, like, was that easy or was that hard? He's like, no, it was easy. I'm like, okay, so what took you so long? He's like, I don't know. I don't know. I guess I was just lazy. I'm like, okay, well, now you have a system, so I'll check in with you in a couple days and we'll see how it goes. And he's like, okay. A couple days go by. How are things working for you? I'm still on track. Okay, good. All right, I'll check in with you a little later. Let a week or two go by and check in again. So how are things working for you? Oh, I'm still organized. I'm like, really? Okay, awesome. I'll keep checking in with you. And then a couple of weeks would go by and I'd check in and say, all right, so how's your backpack looking? He's like, wow, it's still organized. I'm like, really? Isn't that interesting? How hard are you trying? He's like, I'm not. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, I'm not trying hard. It just seems really easy. I'm like, I get a paper and I know what I'm supposed to do with it. I get the paper, and if it doesn't have holes, he punches the 3 holes in it, and he's in class, and it's open to that section. He just opens up his binder rings, puts the paper in there, and snaps it back. He's like, it's actually really easy. It doesn't take any more effort per se. Like, yeah, maybe 5 extra seconds. But he's like, it's really not that hard. Like, interesting. Okay. So in your binder, all the papers that are current are on top and all the papers that are older on the bottom. And so when it starts to get thick and heavy and you're having a hard time closing it, you just go through the binder and pull out the papers and stick it in your desk at home. It's like, yeah. And so I'm like, So revisiting this conversation that we had, do you really think you were lazy and that's why you weren't able to do it all the years prior? He's like, no, I just don't think anyone ever really sat me down and explained how to keep an organized binder backpack. He's like, it seems so simple and easy. Like I should just know how to do it. He's like, but I obviously didn't because I wasn't doing it and it's not that hard. I'm like, okay, great. Well, let's examine what other things are in your life that are happening like that. And just really starting with something small and helping him build that momentum to feel good about himself, that it wasn't just that he was lazy, he was lacking those skills. As simple as it seems, they were just skills he was lacking. And helping him understand and put that in his experience to feel good about himself in terms of him becoming an adult, being more organized, being able to handle things, being able to handle other opportunities makes him feel really good because now he can handle other responsibilities and he likes that feeling of being an adult and treated like an adult versus a kid. And so it just makes it easier to start with something small and then work on something bigger and something bigger and something bigger. So if your kid's lacking a lot of skills, especially life skills, start with something small. Start with something in the academic world, like a binder or a backpack. Start with their desk. Start with something small. If the room is overcluttered, start with a corner of the room. Start with a bookshelf. Start with something where they can see a lot of progress if they just focus on that area. And that's really what it comes down to is if your kid doesn't have skill sets, they're automatically going to look like they're lazy and they're just irresponsible. And there's a difference between your kid having that and having the habits. And I like to think of it as a spectrum. On one end, the more skills that your kid's lacking, the more they look like they're lazy or irresponsible, versus the other side of the spectrum where your kids develop these habits. They have the skills in the beginning. It kind of starts off, it might not be consistent, but as they start developing their skill sets like a muscle that gets stronger and stronger, they become more and more organized. That's the backpack story. So anytime you are thinking about your kid and how to get them to stay organized in your life, just remember the backpack story. So thank you so much for your time and for being here. I look forward to our paths crossing again soon.